Hello and welcome. Today topic is about documentation techniques. After we discussed last week about the TPS or transaction processing system, we discussed also the data framework starting by data input and data processing, data storage, and also the information output as well as the system controls. All of that being discussed in light of the holistic framework of the accounting information system. So this topic or today topic is explaining how these systems work, how to visualize what we explained last week or in the accounting cycles, either expenditure cycle or revenue cycle, into a documented demographical visualized approach. So it will explain how the system works. It will explain who, what, where, when, why, and how data entry, data processing, data storage, as well as information output, and also the system controls. Let me simplify the idea of documentation techniques. So we have in the left side here, we have the description, wordly paragraphs explaining the customer order. Okay, so and in the right side we have the diagram trying to reflect and illustrate the process in the paragraphs. So the notion that a picture is worth 1,000 words is true and certain in the understanding and simplifying the organization's information system. Why we need or why document systems? First, accountant must be able to read documentations and understand how a system works. For example, auditors need to assess the risk. Also, the accountant who work as key in data and also acquiring information or reporting output from the system need to know how it's work, how the system works. And then it is also because of the regulation by Sarbanes-Oxley Act, which required management to assess internal control and auditor to evaluate the assessment, and that can be facilitated by the document system. Lastly, the document systems used for system development and changes. Any development of new system or software and any changes may need to customize, add some functions and so on. All of that will be based on document system. There are four types of documentation techniques. Each type of this techniques have different aim to visualize. Okay, so the first one is business processing modeling notion, PPMN. The PPMN is a flowchart method that models the steps of planning business process from end to end. So it represents certain planning of a process in the business from end to end, from starting to the end of the process. Where the entity relationship diagram (ER) is technique used to represent the relationship between business entities. So it focuses only in the relationship and the type of that relation between the entities. And then data flow diagrams or DFD is a flow chart method that use symbols to represent entities, process, data flow, and data stores. So you can see here that data flow diagrams is representing entities, processing as and type of processing, is it automation or manual, and data flow and also the data storage. So that's why there are we will focus more in the data flow diagrams, because it's somehow covering also as well is covering also the many processing types. And then we have the systems flowchart. System flowchart is a flowchart that shows data flow while writing the program or algorithm. So it is in the state. Normally, systems flowchart is used by IT people, by programmers. It allows the users to explain the process equally as they collaborate with others. Here we will discuss the business processing models notion in the first. As we give the definition just now, it is focusing, or it's covering the starting the end-to-end process, business process. So starting, this is the starting point and this is the end of the process, and within is the explanation of the process. And these diagrams is showing the symbols that used in the business process diagram. Okay, so you can see that those symbols in the previous diagrams in the previous slide. Figure 3.2 illustrating or giving us an example of process diagram of payroll processing at S&S company. S&S company is an example used by the textbook, and for this chapter is in page 88. So what is differentiate the business process diagram from the other diagrams techniques? That in this diagram or the in the business process diagram, it can distinguish the departments or location that the activity take place, and this is clear in when you look into the left side of the figure. You see the employee or the department. You see here the different department, and each department or each location of activity, it gives one row to illustrate the activities happen in that place, and this will help to also to show who's the person in charge and what is the responsibility for any activities process. Now let's have a look into the entity relationship diagram. Entity relationship diagram, it is a technique that used to represent the relationship between business entities. So it is also explaining the degree of the relationship or the cardinality level of, in a numeric or alphabet mapping. So let's say we have this type of cardinality, one to one, one to many, or many to many, and it shows how redundant this relationship between, or the relationship between these two entities can be occurred. So it's, if it is many to many, means it's from many transactions happened, come from many customers, let's say one entity and the employee, and for many employee can serve that customer. We will have an example later on to explain this. So one thing to mention here, that AR, or entity relationship diagram, documents AR and DFD. DFD is data flow diagrams, which we'll explain later on. It's both, they serve different type of aspect, they cover different type of aspect, but they still related because they explain the relationship or explain the data flow process. So we will have certain examples in the lecture time to illustrate or to facilitate the understanding of the H diagram. Entity relationship diagram. This an example showing the relationship or the cardinality level. So we can see here that customer and product, the relationship between these two entities is and this is the how it's illustrated. So this one means many, and this one is means one, and it means one customer can have or can buy many product, and this is the attributes of the product, and this is the attribute of the customers, and so on. Actually, we will not focus on this entity relationship diagrams as I mentioned earlier, but it is good to have overall understanding, or at least you know a clue what is the entity relationship diagram. It will be uh, one of the main topic in accounting information system too. Now let's move to system flowchart. System flowchart is the graphical representation of the physical relationship among key elements of system. So system flowchart is the elements includes departments, manual activities, computer programs, hard copy, and digital accounting records. Also describes the physical computer media being applied. Also, it shows the process of a single transaction. This table showing the symbols that we can use for manual procedures for the DFD or the data flow chart. And these symbols used in the computer procedures. So this is when we key in data, and this one for real-time connection. We will have some examples of that. So instead of having file, for storing, normally we have two lines in the manual, but here we will have sort of this simple to represent direct access or storage device. In the system flowchart, we can see or we can determine the area of the activities or the location. So you can see here sales department, credit department, warehouse, shipping department, and so on. You can do that. Okay, so what we can notice here is manual process here, that the transaction is based on manual transaction. So this is the manual process of the sales order, and there are 4 copies of the manual document. Okay, and then it moves and it shows the connectivity by the arrow to the next department for next processing. And again also it is using the manual process to check the credit, using also the credit records, and this sample is for the journal. And then if it's approved, then we write down what is the output of this process. So we have the input, we have the process, we have the storage, and we have the process. Same things goes to here. So you have destination, starting point, and then we have the input for this process, and then we have the output. And then after they send here, send back, it come back to the sales department. Again, we do process the distribution of sales order and file. So they file some file. This one is for filing, and then they send 2 copies to the shipment department, and 1 copy will be sent to the warehouse for process. And you can see where when we have the manual process, it should be input and output, and sometime for storage it is we'll use this file. Okay, same things goes to the shipment and so on. Okay, so here we try to look into this the same transaction, but if it in the computerized environment. So you can see here we are using different symbols. So this symbol is for key in. We have so we have this customer issuing or sending customer order, and then the stuff in the sales department will key in. So this is the symbol used for key into the system, and the firm square is shape or symbol is used to key in the data. So if you notice here is edit and credit check. this is the process. So the input is coming from customer order by using the terminal, and then we have the credit history file. This is digital filing to update this process, and then the output also will be sales order transaction file. And then we will have another process. The input is the sales order file, and the update of the program will update the account receivable file and inventory file, which is related to the transaction. Okay, so that is how it is in the computer side. But what we notice here is that it's shorting or having shortcut. Now we are updating the files, which is the accounting file, and also we are preparing the sales order process. So then after we send this, the update program will send prepared documents, send to the warehouse. In this example, they still use manual process of shipping and picking the goods. So you can see only the stock records is update in digital form. But in some companies, they may have high computerized environment system. Now let's have a look into the program flowchart. Program flowchart, it provides operational details for every program represented in a system flowchart. It shows control placed internally to the program within the system. And it is important to notice this program flowchart sometime used by accountant to verify the correctness of the program logic, and also it is kind of system that or program flowchart that used mainly by the programmers. So this is the symbols used for the program flowchart. Logic process, decision, this diamond shape is for decision, and this input or output operation, and terminal starting or ending. It's quite same to if this sample somehow is same to the entity planning process, business process. So this is an example of program flowchart for edit program, and you can see here when we have the starting with the the oval side, and then we have the when we have the diamond, it means decision. So decision should be yes or no. So if it is no, then we go beyond. If no, if yes, then we stop and start again. Now let's talk about the data flow diagram, DFD. DFD is a flowchart method that uses symbols to represent the entities, process, data, documents flow, and data stories. So we already have sort of discussion about system flowchart and system program or program flowchart, and now we will try to explain the DFD DFD or data flow diagram, mainly for the data process or data documentation flow. Okay, so the three types of flowchart is documents flowchart, system flowchart, program flowchart. Document flowchart, it shows the flow of the documents and data for process useful in evaluating the internal controls, whereby system flowchart, it shows the data processing cycle for the process. This one we have already discussed it in before this. And also the program flowchart is illustrating the sequence of logical the sequence of the logic in the system process. The data flow diagram DFD maps out the flow of the information for either system or process. So it can use to flow the data, to visualize the data, either for processing purpose or for the system in any organization. DFD are visually simple and can be used to represent the same process at high abstract summary or detailed levels. And we will have some examples of this when we discuss in the class. In the lecture we will discuss some examples of high abstract. Means we have maybe one process, and then we can subtract or have sub processing. We can extract this from this one simple process to many process. I'll have examples later on this to clarify this. And it shows, this one, it shows flexibility of the DFD to give better understanding. Sometimes the more abstract visual DFD may not give understanding to certain transaction, especially for programmers. So programmers or software developers, they may need more details DFD. So they need more details or more what we call level 1 or 2 DFD. So we have in the textbook certain examples, so we'll use it in the lecture time. Okay, then as I said, DFD used extensively by system analysts to represent the logical element of the system, but does not portray the physical system. So it is not affecting the physical understanding of the system. This is the most common flowchart symbols used. If you need to go to find these tables, you can go to the textbook in page 90 and 91. So it's explained either the manual or the computerized system. So you can go for that. So you can see here the basic data flow diagram elements. We have data source. This is the starting destination, and it should have ending destination to a certain area, and within it there will be a process. So in this case we have two process, and this one, the two lines, is represent the data store. Normally the students face difficulties in drawing a proper flow charts, or sometimes they miss some point of the process or the flow of the data or some documents. So here we will give some guidelines for drawing a proper or quality flowchart. So the first one is understanding the system you are trying to visualize and present. So if you don't understand the system that you are trying to visually represent, no one else will understand what you are trying to create. So there are some way to help you to understand the system. First, by observing the process taking place in the company, interview the people who are responsible to process that things, and ask questions, and maybe walk through the transaction, try to understand how the data flow, what is the source of documents, and so on. And then the second one is to identify the business process documents, data flow, and data processing procedures. So you need to understand this. And this one also can be done by looking into the manual of the transaction if the company have, or ask questions, interview, observe. All of that can bring you a better understanding for what is the business process, what is the document, what is the data flow of the process, where it starts, and how it's controlled by the procedures, and where it ends. And then organize the flow chart so it's easy to read, starting from top to bottom and left to right, because we are talking about English form of that of this flow chart. So you need to start from up, from top of the page to the bottom, and left to right. Okay, and then start from the high level, or we call it context diagram, which is the very summary of overall summary of the process, to show how data flow between the outside entities and the inside of the system. And then you can, after that, use additional DFD at the details level as needed. Then identify and group all basic elements for the DFD, and you can group them based on departments or group them based on the relation. So in order not to have too much connectivity and too long arrows, so better to group them based on the departments and functionality. And then name data elements with the descriptive names used. Use action verbs for the process. Especially for process, you should use the action or verb name. So let's say update, edit, prepare, validate, uh, uh, print, and so on. Store. Give each process a sequential number to help the reader navigate from the abstract to the details level. So if you have more than one process in one DFD or data flow, though, so you need to have the numbering sequence number for the first process and second to the last processing. And remember, the symbol we use for the process is the circle. So you can put in each circle number inside the number in the top of that before the writing the name of that process. And then clearly label all symbols. Use page connectors. If you need to use second page, then you'll use a small circle to connect to other page. Then before when you finish, then edit, review, refine to make it easy to read and understand, because sometimes you finish but you find that too many lines, long line, arrows and so on, so you can simply go through again and try to make it better. As anything of you need to refine your draft and receiving the feedback to help provide better and clear understanding, as this what you have done is should be readable, understandable to the others. Since we are in Islamic University, so let's have a look into the Islamic view of the documentation techniques, or what we call the visualizing of visualizing idea into a figure or symbols to help better understanding or ease the idea. So the Prophet ﷺ, in one day with his companions, he did draw in the sand this symbol, and then he explained to them this is the he drew a square, and then he drew a line from inside the square up to outside the square, and then the Prophet ﷺ said this is the human, and then he put this lines, he said this is the circumstances or the things that happened every day, and he said this line is the hope, and the line of the square is represent the death surrounding the human. So it's just to represent that human normally have long hope, even longer than the his life or her life. So it shows that we should also think about the akhirah. That is how the Prophet ﷺ representing or visualizing this idea into a visual diagram. Okay, that is a simple idea, just to bring you that we have something, and this science or the documentation techniques is not something strange in our Islamic culture and history. Okay, thank you so much for your listening. And today we try to cover the documentation techniques. Documentation techniques is a very, very vital and important techniques that used by the in the accounting information system, as well as by the auditors to understand the system flow and also understand the internal control process. Thank you so much, and see you in the next topic.